Welcome back into Crosstalk as we continue our series here this morning on education. It's Education Wednesdays, and looking like it's going to be a permanent feature on Crosstalk. We're going to talk about education and how the whole educational process works. We're joined on this morning's program by Dr. Betty Summers. She's superintendent of Re1 Valley Schools. And Dr. Summers, this week's topic is curriculum.
And we're surely excited to be here and share with you information about how curriculum is put together, how it ties many loose ends together for what we're required to as a public school district to do. Today we have Mr. Ron Morostica, who is our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, and Mr. Doug Stutzman, who is our K-12 or Preschool 12 principal out at Caliche in our country school. So in my opinion, you have two of the gentlemen in our district who help us make sure that curriculum works for our students, works for our staff, because they know the ins and outs of how to make it work in the classrooms and for the district. So I'm pleased that they're here to answer questions and talk with you today.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you for coming in and being willing to help us understand this process a little bit better. Ron, you're the assistant superintendent, correct?
Correct.
You have been working most recently with the math frameworks, correct? Is that
was our last revision, yes.
Walk me through the process of adopting a new curriculum, because this isn't something that you go, ooh, that book has a pretty cover, let's go.
Correct, and actually, books have nothing to do with the instructional frameworks to begin with. We have a committee. We'll talk about the math committee. The math committee is composed of teachers from preschool through 12th grade. Every grade level and building is represented. So the committee approaches around 30 teachers, and we look at the state standards and what we're expected to do in the state of Colorado in terms of math instruction. And our teachers then take those standards, which includes the Common Core that you hear so much about, and they think about how do those grade level student expectations match what our students in Re1 Valley need in terms of instruction, and they plan an instructional framework that addresses state standards at a minimum. Oftentimes they go beyond the state standards, and then create a game plan of instruction from preschool through 12th grade that guarantees that every student will achieve those grade level expectations set by the state, which ultimately determine, for example, in grades 3 through 10, what appears on the TCAP state test. So after that is written, we have one full year of implementation where teachers implement what they have written in the frameworks, and then we look for what you mentioned first, the textbooks, the support materials that will allow us to deliver the instruction that will guarantee student success. So the teachers get a chance to implement the new frameworks, realize where there are challenging needs for instructional materials to fit what particular student audiences need, and then we go out to publishers to ask for what do you have that matches this need in Re1 Valley.
How often do you go through curriculum updating? Because it's not something you can go, we're updating all of the curriculum right now.
Each year, a different content area is addressed, basically, and it's on we call it a 7-year cycle. It actually is a little less than that because there's a year of writing, as I've already described, within that 7-year period. So it isn't as I said, purely a 7-year time frame in between writings, because as each one of those committees stay in place, and as we look at, for example, when we get our TCAP results or our ACT results or whatever, and we look at where our strengths and weaknesses are, the math committee might need to meet in between those revision times to discuss, how are we doing this or how are we doing that? Because those teachers are the ones that take that instruction to the building level and make sure that those instructional goals are understood at the building level.
Definitely. We're having our Education Wednesday series, and we're talking about curriculum. Ron Moroska, who deals with it district-wide in Re1 Valley, Doug Stutzman, who's the principal at Kalichi as well. Doug, talk with me a little bit on your end and your teacher's end, because each individual building has their own role within developing some of this curriculum as well.
And we all have a kind of a vested interest in what the district decides to do with the curriculum, because test scores are weighty, and they're big time now for all of us, and so we really need to pay attention to what we're delivering and how we're delivering it. The teachers who serve on those committees take their roles very seriously. And one of the things that I think Ron does a really good job of is making them explore the research related to each curriculum area and the teaching strategies that go along with it, and make sure that we have a research base that we can refer to when we're talking to textbook publishers. And when we're looking at textbooks, that's when that becomes kind of an important thing. What have you done to make sure that best practice can be followed using this resource? We, be real honest with you, we've never found textbooks that can just be the curriculum. We've had to look at the gaps Ron was talking about, the different areas where the teachers recognize that we're not addressing the frameworks adequately, and we need to find some supplemental material or resource that will address that. And that's the teacher's role, is to provide that kind of input to the committee and to Ron. And the district is very responsive to make sure that we have what we need. And so once we have all that in place, it's just our job to deliver what's been provided. And to be real honest with you, if we're not satisfied with what's been provided, the district has been very good about, okay, what is it you need? And we get it.
Definitely. It's the math curriculum kind of has been one of those challenging curriculums for both of you guys within the individual schools and as a district as a whole to work with. How long has this math process taken that is currently underway, or you're underway? Will the textbooks be implemented this year, or are you just getting started?
Right. We're in the process of doing the staff development around the support materials for this fall. And as Doug said, the teachers take their responsibilities on the curriculum committee so seriously. It has been I've been here long enough now that math was one of the very first curriculums that we worked on when I began in Re1 Valley, and now they're through their first cycle of revision, and the teachers who wrote and worked on the frameworks 7 years ago, the majority of them are still on the committee, so they have that history now and that understanding of where some of the challenges in finding the right materials to address every single kid. There isn't, as Doug said, a single source, a single book that is going to address the need of every single kid. We might need additional supplementary materials for ESL issues or SPED issues. We have to make sure that every kid has access to the grade level expectations. It isn't the fact that we can grab this book and say, well, this will address most of the learners. We have to have material.
It's the way it used to be, but it can't be that way anymore.
Right. How does, obviously, things change as you go through education. How does the Internet play a role in this now? Because the accessibility is so accessible now for all of these teachers to supplement this. How does that play a role, and how do you rein that in so that it doesn't get out of control and doesn't get outside of your framework?
The frameworks determine what, and the student evidence column in our frameworks, which is what that student evidence column is what by grade level students are expected to do in order to meet the expectations of grade 1, 10, whatever grade. And within that, we look at ebooks. We look at and have ebooks for in place in many grades. They're interesting. Right now, we're in the process this last week of one of the support materials that the math committee felt was key to delivering some of the math skills that are identified in the frameworks is a calendar that is on that we purchase the rights to for them to use in their classrooms, and it's also internet based. So there are many things now that are internet based that allow kids to access information at home. They don't have to carry the book home. They can go online to get what they need. So that's a piece that a few years ago didn't exist.
Absolutely. We're talking curriculum on our Education Wednesdays here on Crosstalk. Ron Moroska and Doug Stutzman are guests this morning. And Doug, there's more than just teachers that work with these students as well. How do you make sure that the same curriculum, especially with those students who have IEDs, individual education development plans, or IEPs, I guess would be the acronym, how do you make sure that they still fit within this framework as well, especially from an individual building standpoint?
That's a tough one because, you're dealing with a lot of people who are paid by the hour, and in the summertime they've got to find ways to make a living when we're not. So we do provide as much training as paras can avail of themselves to. And we also make sure that the paras are on board at the beginning of the year when we're putting things together. One of the things that I think is real important is that paras spend time in classrooms, and along with the students, they're getting instruction and they're getting a feel for how the teacher is delivering instruction, and that they meet with those teachers on a real regular basis to make sure that we're on the same page as far as the things we're saying to kids, the strategies that we're using with kids. Is it working? Is it not working? And teachers have to take the time to do that, and I understand that sometimes it's difficult to take time for one more thing to do, but that's one of the things that I think, at least our paras out at Caliche, I would like to give them a little plug. They do a really good job of holding our teachers' feet to the fire, make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to. They're very conscientious.
Absolutely. It's a challenging thing, but it's also a community that you guys have to create, because it takes a village to raise a child.
One teacher can't do it, not with 25, 30 kids per class. And like Ron said very, very pointedly, we can't no longer teach to the middle and just say, well, most of them will get it. We have to make sure they all get it, and that they all are afforded that grade level opportunity. And so that's what you're talking about, Ben, is more than one person involved with every class, between the teacher and maybe a flood teacher and a para or two, and there's a lot of communication that has to take place.
No question. Now, Ron, there's also the wonderfully dry topic, although you may enjoy it because this is your job, of the state education rules. And they're constantly changing. How, especially with this new math framework, has the education rules forced you guys to change from maybe what you had 7 years ago?
That's an excellent question, Ben. 7 years ago, our state frameworks were, to devised in groups of grades. There were standards to be met in grade. Preschool wasn't even included at that time. And the first span was grade 1 to 4, and then what our committee did was take those standards that were the goal at the end of fourth grade instruction, and we divvied them up over grade 1, 2, 3, and 4 to make some kind of continuum work for us. What has changed with the adoption of the Common Core, as well as all the new academic standards in the state of Colorado, are written by grade level. So every grade level has goals, and the rigor of those goals have increased remarkably. When you talk with some of the teachers, that's, I'm sure, one of the first things that they'll mention. The rigor of what students are expected to be able to do at any grade level has changed remarkably over time. Common Core brought a great deal of that to the forefront. But the Colorado academic standards that were in place even before Common Core had increased the rigor and had been written around the idea that every grade, including preschool, needed to have academic goals.
And that's the ultimate goal, regardless of what you've got, whether you're talking math or reading or science or whatever you're putting in, is the students need to meet their goals and continue to grow. That's the goal of education, and it takes a lot to go into this. We've had just 16 minutes to talk about the curriculum, but there's so much more that goes into it, and you guys have rules that you have to follow.
And we haven't even talked about how do we know if they're where they're supposed to be.
Well,
that's a whole other piece of it that takes a bunch of time.
Well, and that's exactly was kind of what I wanted to end with here, or have our final question was, you hear parents say, "Oh, they're just teaching to the test," in reference to the CSAP, or now the TCAP, as it's called. Are you teaching to the test? And it's kind of a double-edged sword here, because I think it can go both ways.
Oh, we're teaching to the test. I'm not going to beat around the bush on that. I mean, you'd be foolish to say, let's just don't pay any attention to what the test is. Let's teach what we think. Too much went into that. I mean, when the legislature and the Department of Ed are dictating to us, they are dictating to us based upon what they know that we're supposed to be able to do based on the TCAP. And so that does drive a lot of what we do, and so does the ACT. Drives a lot of what we do, especially secondary. And so we do have to pay attention to the test, and we have to pay attention to pacing, because you can only do so much, and that's one of the things that these committees now have had to take on that increases their responsibility. Is they've got to come up with some realistic pacing for teachers so that they can get through what they need to do in a year with all kinds of different kids in the room.
No question about that, and we'll have a continuation. We're going to have our next part in this series is going to have the math committee in to talk with Ron. Doug, thank you for being willing to share your expertise, and Ron as well, and we'll have you back on another show.
Thanks.
Thanks.